largest private health insurance company.
The New York Police Department says he was targeted in a pre-planned attack. NBC News has obtained surveillance video of the moment of the shooting. We've stopped it before the first shot is fired, and we're only going to show you this once. Some viewers may find it disturbing. It shows United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson wearing that blue jacket, walking into frame. The shooter appears behind him, draws his gun, pulls the trigger, shooting multiple times.
Surveillance images released by the NYPD show the gunman getting away from the scene on an electric bicycle. This all unfolded shortly before 7 this morning. The shooting scene is just blocks away from where we are at Rockefeller Plaza, which is hosting the Rockefeller tree lighting ceremony tonight. Police said the suspect was last seen heading into Central Park. Leading us off this hour, NBC News correspondent Sam Brock. So Sam, you're outside the hotel where this all happened. What's the latest from authorities on the suspect and the search?
Sure. Zink Lake, Kate, good to be with you. Certainly it's sickening and it's chilling to see that video. The murder, which is pre-planned, lying in wait is the words that law enforcement used to describe how the shooter in this case was approaching this murder. Happened over my shoulder. I mean, you see it's all taped out right now. This is next to the Hilton downtown, as you mentioned, a couple of blocks from where you are. This is one of the largest hotels in Midtown Manhattan. They were hosting an investor conference for United Health Group when, of course, that was canceled. This all starting at about 6:45 this morning. That's when law enforcement said that the shooter was essentially on the sidewalk but hiding, and then came out as Brian Thompson, 50 years old, CEO of the largest private insurer in the country, at least the insurance arm of the company, and was gunned down. What is so sort of unsettling about this video, among other things, is the fact that you will see the shooter walk up, right? We freeze it when he fires the gun. But then there's a woman that's in the corner, you can see earlier in the shot, that is just standing there in the doorway. And so the shooter approaches and clearly goes and guns down Thompson, shoots him in the back, and there's a woman wondering if she's going to be shot. And then she just kind of staggers away and then runs away. He had no intention of killing her, which perhaps speaks to the narrative that police are saying that this was a targeted attack, and then continues to fire the shooter. After he strikes Thompson the first time, the gun actually jams, and then he resolves it and keeps going. That could be evidence of the fact that this was a proficient and perhaps professional killer. Whatever it might be, this 50-year-old man is now deceased, and police are continuing to canvass the city, searching for the murder suspect who was last seen entering, guys, Central Park on an e-bike.
Yeah, and can we talk a little bit more about the victim, the 50-year-old Brian Thompson? Do we have any sense of why he might have been targeted, or just tell us a little more about him?
Sure. We all know that a lot of people have an axe to grind with insurance companies. It's unclear whether or not that is relevant in this case. I can tell you that one of my fellow reporters, David Lee, spoke with Thompson's wife earlier today. She said that they had conversations about the fact that he was being threatened. She did not elaborate much, but did mention that there was actually calls made from our folks to the Minneapolis area police department where they live. They didn't have any records of calls about 911 or emergency situations of note in the last several years, but that is a possibility. But we also know about Mr. Thompson had two sons, guys. One who is a senior high school, one a freshman in college.
Just so sad, Sam. And of course, this all also happened in the middle of Midtown Manhattan. It's a busy holiday season, security everywhere. We have the tree lighting tonight here at Rockefeller Plaza. What are officials doing to keep us safe?
They say that the entire area is saturated with detectives, counterterrorism police officers, beat cops who are out there on the streets, that there's plenty of protection and eyes out on everything, and they don't seem to be alarmed at all that this person is a threat to public safety, simply because, for no other reason, it wasn't anything other than a targeted attack. According to law enforcement, he had a specific action in mind, and he completed it tragically in the middle of the city.
Okay, Sam Brock with the latest for us. Thanks so much.
President-elect Donald Trump's pick to lead the Defense Department says he is not backing down despite growing concerns about his road to confirmation.
Pete Hegseth is facing several allegations of sexual misconduct and drunken behavior, which he has denied and was not charged for. In a radio interview earlier today, Hegseth called the accusations against him, quote, ridiculous.
What you're seeing right now with me is the art of the smear. Take whatever tiny kernels of truth, and there are tiny ones in there, and blow them up into a masquerade of a narrative about somebody that I am definitely not.
NBC News has learned the president-elect is considering replacing Hegseth with Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. That's according to two sources familiar with the decision-making.
Hegseth met with Republican senators again today on Capitol Hill. He called it a, quote, wonderful process. However, 3 GOP sources tell NBC News that as many as 6 Republican senators are not comfortable supporting Hegseth. NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ryan Nobles joins us now. Ryan, there are a lot of moving parts here to keep track of. What do we know right now about talks to potentially replace Pete Hegseth, and what are some of the other names that we hear are being considered?
Yeah, well, first off, Kate, it's important to keep in mind that Pete Hegseth is insistent that he's not going anywhere. In fact, I just left him as he was walking into a meeting with Joni Ernst of Iowa, who is a Republican senator, someone who could potentially be someone skeptical of his candidacy for that top job at the Pentagon, particularly because she is someone who has tried to root out the sexual assault problem that the military is dealing with. And of course, Pete Hegseth does have these accusations of mistreatment of women in his past. But we do know that the Trump transition is at least exploring possible options outside of Hegseth. You mentioned Ron DeSantis already. Another name being floated is Mike Wallace, who's the congressman and the pick for the National Security Advisor. Does he slide over and instead take over at the DOD? And Joni Ernst is actually a possible name, one of the people that Hegseth is meeting with right now. It's important to keep in mind, though, we are not at that stage yet. This nomination is not yet been pulled. Hegseth seems pretty defiant and is using a very aggressive media campaign right now to push back against these accusations against him.
And Ryan, notably, Hegseth aside, he's not the only pick who has faced scrutiny here. Matt Gaetz withdrew from consideration as Attorney General after some controversy. So what are you hearing from lawmakers about the vetting process that we're seeing for the president-elect's choices?
Well, I think it's important to keep in mind that Republican senators want to vote yes on Donald Trump's picks. They believe that he won the election, that he has the right to pick the people that he wants to serve in his cabinet. But they also strongly believe that they have a constitutional authority to advise and consent in these roles and really to help the president, to be an additional screening as part of this process before these picks are confirmed. And they want rigorous background checks on all of these folks, and that includes vetting, perhaps even FBI vetting. And there's some concern that the Trump transition is not going to agree to that level of vetting, which could lead to some of these picks not getting the votes they need.
Ryan Nobles for us on Capitol Hill. Ryan, thanks so much.
And this morning, the Supreme Court heard oral arguments for what could be a defining case on transgender rights.
At issue, a Tennessee law that bans gender-affirming care, such as puberty blockers and hormone therapy for minors. The court's decision could reverberate around the country. 26 states, you see them there, have passed laws or policies banning gender-affirming care for people under the age of 18. NBC News correspondent Antonia Hilton joins us now. Antonia, great to see you. So oral arguments lasted, 2.5 hours or so this morning. Walk us through what we heard from both sides.
Well, the key question in front of the court this morning was, does this ban on gender-affirming care in Tennessee violate the Constitution and discriminate on the basis of sex? And what you heard was the Biden administration and, the people representing 3 families with transgender minors arguing that it does, that this is a sex-based form of discrimination. And that's because hormones and puberty blockers, the interventions that are basically at the center of this, are still available, just not if you are a transgender minor in the state of Tennessee. And that is the line they're saying that has been drawn here. The state of Tennessee, of course, is arguing that the state has the right, really the imperative, moral imperative, to act to protect these children because they say these interventions are not necessary, that they are potentially risky, not studied well enough. And what makes it really tricky at times to follow this debate is that there's a constitutional question in front of this court, but the policy, the politics, the culture, they all end up bleeding in. So the conversation kind of veered at times to, well, we're seeing what they're doing over in Europe. That's different than what we're doing here, and whether or not what they've done has really actually banned care for minors. That's not the question, though, that is in front of this court. Still, what the court may end up deciding, of course, will have major, profound implications for kids all over this country.
And can we dig into that? What might those implications be, depending on how the court rules here, for the country?
Well, very simply, it could mean that for thousands of transgender children living in this country, they are not able to access medical care that many of them say is vital to them feeling alive, to put it very simply. Feeling like they're fully human, feeling like they are themselves when they wake up in the morning and they look in the mirror and they go to school, right? It could mean that path is paved for a national ban. We know that President-elect Trump has expressed interest in doing that. So it could mean that it's not just 26 or so states that have this on the books. It's applied all over the country. And what people who support transgender children and advocates who work with them, psychiatrists and therapists who work with them say is that this could have devastating impacts on their health outcomes, on their mental health. And so that's really what's at stake here. And we will not know until later this summer. That's when a decision like this would come down, guys.
All right. We know you'll stay on it. Anthony Hilton.